I would think about browser, it's a user interface, right? That's the interface that we all predominantly use, right? So it's an access a SaaS application, your emails, collaboration tools, etc. Right? So browser kind of became sort of this ubiquitous tool for user interface. And a mark of a leader is how many more leaders he or she makes. So that was his kind of the guiding principle. And so it's not about yourself. It's less about title. So like, did you help an intern become a consultant, or a consultant become a better senior consultant? Or how did you help that individual gain new skills, make more learning, understanding your environment, understanding your risk, your visibility of those risks. The business is running like 200 miles an hour, and the InfoSec is always trying to catch up. And I think that's the other gap that exists, that you're living in the future, but you're using tools of the past. So you got to make sure you bridge that gap.
Well, hello, Vijay. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. Vijay Jajoo is right now on our Be Fearless podcast. It's such a pleasure to have you here with us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I just want to give a brief introduction and overview of you, what we are doing here on this podcast. So Vijay is actually a partner at KPMG, and you focus on cyber, data, and tech enablement. And you're also a board and C-suite advisor who helped Fortune 50 companies navigate the complex landscape when it comes to cyber trust safety. And you have more than 2 decades of experience, so I'm sure we're going to have a lot of depth in our conversation. And super excited to talk to you about the evolving landscape when it comes to security and just your personal journey. So you actually have been at KPMG for 26 years, which is quite unusual in today's environment where people keep on shifting from place to place. So what was your journey like, and why did you choose to go into consulting?
Yeah, no, Sasha, thank you for having me. First of all, I really appreciate, looking forward to this conversation. I think the journey was something I didn't plan. And it was probably somewhat of an accident, and how it evolved. I believe I was like maybe around 14 or 15, or at least in my teens. One of my dad's friend was a partner at KPMG India. And during a summer holiday, he was visiting us, and he asked me a question like, what do you want to do? And I was like, I'm 14, I'm 15, I have no idea what I want to do. And he was like, hey, have you thought about maybe you should join KPMG? And of course I said like, yeah. And I'm thinking in my head, I have no idea what like KPMG is. Mm-hmm. And sort of fast forward, and then I was doing my master's in telecommunications in San Francisco at University of San Francisco. And I ended up seeing a flyer about KPMG.
Okay.
And it was literally an event happening in San Francisco office, which was around their organization called Information Risk Management. So it was all related to how do you manage and evaluate sort of risk, including cybersecurity, which was the term not even called cybersecurity at that time. So I responded to that flyer. And I went through the interview process, and of course, when you fast forward, being in Silicon Valley, you have amazing people, amazing clients from Fortune 5 to Fortune 10 to Fortune 30 companies. The firm gave me amazing experiences. Even though I've been with one as KPMG, I feel like I've had 30 jobs, because I've had some amazing clientele where I've spent years sort of understanding the environment, understanding the priorities, sort of managing risk, building solutions, etc. So yeah, it's never been a dull moment. So I've been here 26 years.
Oh, wow. It just shows a great power of marketing when it comes to finding, individuals' flyers. I don't know if they work as well as today, but back at that time, I'm sure it really made a difference in your career where you went. And why cyber? Like, why? How do you wake up one day? I know that you saw this flyer, and then you mentioned that friend of a family was partnered at KPMG. But why cybersecurity? What's something that stood out to you that made you choose this domain?
Yeah, great question. I didn't plan that either. My undergrad was in kind of business and economics. And, so when you think about in mid-90s, when sort of internet came, quote unquote, like dub, sort of the democratization happened, emails was like, the first sort of user application people were using. It was so exciting to see you send a message and you get a message back, instantly, or chat came out. There was sort of one thing, if I define about myself, is in one word, if I can summarize sort of my guiding principle, it's called curiosity. So it's a curiosity to learn from each other, and really having that open mind. So there was this curiosity in my mind. I was doing sort of business and economics. How does a text message go from my phone to somebody else's phone? So that was just my one curiosity when cell phones became prevalent in mid-90s. I know I'm dating myself here. That led me to literally enroll in masters in telecommunications. So that was my degree, literally to quest for that question. And so how does text message gets translated in binary to radio waves to an SMS service, goes to the nearest cell tower, et cetera. I don't mean to describe how the message travels here, but that curiosity led me to get into understanding networks. So from network infrastructure to understand that is so critical for communication, I stumbled upon something called InfoSec. Now, how should you secure the data and the message that is traveling on that network? So that's what piqued my interest. Within KPMG, I got into red teaming exercises. And then I thought, testing and breaking things was the best thing. Then I realized the value is in building things, not breaking things. So I think the sheer pervasiveness of .com, the e-commerce boom that took place in late 90s, and that sort of curiosity of understanding how communication happens, and then seeing so many of the services and applications that were built on networks. And so those were the days when the internet was exploding in terms of the usage, and then sort of understanding, hey, securing those networks is super valuable for sort of building that trust in that network, in that ecosystem. So I think that was sort of, again, the curiosity to kind of learn not just building networks, but also securing networks.
Yeah, it looked like very much of a step-by-step process where you're like, okay, how do phones work? And then I can't believe, honestly, that was a big reason, to go and do masters in this, and then pivot later on to securing the space. What do you think when you just started in your career? Something that you didn't expect to learn about the space, and something that you think drastically changed today?
Yeah, no, I think several things. Consulting was new. Consulting was hard. I did some kind of work in the industry before even my master's, and joining consulting, it was definitely sort of being adaptable, being flexible. I was not designed to be a consultant as in a natural manner. And so, yes, there was a learning process in terms of understanding sort of the consulting model, how it works. But from a technology perspective, there was so much change that was happening at that time from an e-commerce standpoint. If I think about, I was super interested in the whole PKI and public key infrastructure, because that was the model for sort of enabling commerce online. And so I was super interested in how does the trust happens between the client server technology was the biggest thing. Of course, browser became a key element of sort of the browser security and sort of the explosion of Internet Explorer versus American the Netscape, etc. So I think during that time you saw a bunch of change and sort of the new technology emerging, and you sort of fast forward. I think all of that change has sort of gotten compounded, right? It's actually multifold has reached, right? Given the advent of tech, we've gone from like dub of the internet to the PKIs for the security. Then came sort of desktops and PCs in the early 2000s. So it was about endpoint protection became a thing. Then came in 2007 the first smartphones. So mobile became a thing to say, oh, we got to protect mobile because significant amount of communications happening on enterprise mobile platform. Then it was cloud came in the 2010s, and then of course it was crypto was a big deal, and zero trust, and of course now it's every single thing about AI being democratized. So I think you see kind of this massive shift in some of the evolution, even the security capability and computing platforms. And the amount of data that we are generating and processing is ginormous. So yeah, I think those have been an exciting time to learn and adapt. How we secure these multiple environments as enterprises are adopting these tech, and so that has of course led for all of us to continually innovate and sort of challenge ourselves to bring the sort of right solutions capability to enterprises as well.
Yeah, it seems like you really have to be jack of all trades when it comes to tech nowadays, really understanding so many granularities and so many evolving issues. But I really wonder, you mentioned earlier that consulting is quite different when it comes to like being a head of security in a traditional enterprise. What sort of qualities do you think does it take to be a partner focusing on cyber, and what kind of qualities do you think don't quite fit for someone who is considering which direction to go to?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one of the things when I recruit and interview so many professionals or maybe younger professionals who have probably no idea what they want to do in their career, I actually always say, you have no idea what you want to do in a career, join consulting. And even if you know what you want to do in a career, join consulting for a bit, for sure. So I think what I think consulting, and I would say I'm blessed and honored to have the type of clients and have the type of leaders and mentors around me who have sort of guided me throughout my career and journey, and the teams around me, is just super adaptable, super flexible, and sort of, I would think, like I kind of joke about with my team members, be like a SpongeBob. So like just be like as a sponge to be able to absorb and sort of reflect back or give back. Folks who are maybe have a very strong opinion about I'm a red team guy or a gal, I can only do that, or I'm a cloud person, I can only do cloud. I think you're limiting yourself. Or I'm a financial services person, I should only focus on financial services industry. So I think having that ability to be open, to be flexible, to be adaptable in a given circumstances that you're going to be thrown into or put into is super kind of key to success. And the second thing, you're of course work in a large ecosystem as a team. And you will be asked for multiple priorities. So how do you manage your sort of time management, sort of prioritization or ruthless prioritization in some cases, and sort of raising your hand to ask for help when you really need help, Oftentimes, folks don't ask for help, or it's too late by the time they ask for help. I think so. Those are some of the key attributes that I feel. And I think you talked about challenges. I would say the biggest challenge that I feel is about how do you manage multiple priorities. So every client is important. The client have deadlines, milestones, and it's all about client service. In our DNA, it's all about client service. Of course, delivering value to the client, and we want to go above and beyond. So how do you manage that expectation, that those milestones are deliverables? So it's like sometimes juggling 50 different crystal balls at the same time.
Yeah, juggling so many balls, and then at the same time making sure that no one feels unloved when you serve so many clients.
You don't want to drop any of the crystal balls.
Exactly. And I know I saw on LinkedIn, you mentioned that one of your missions is to make the internet a safer place. And you told about your background, but I'm curious if there was any specific story or incident that made you think of this specific phrase and think, this is my mission.
Yeah, no, great question. I think there were a few different, maybe like a pivotal moments or self-reflection. Being technologist at heart, love to adopt, play with tech, and of course utilize kind of in your own personal lives. And being in the profession itself, my journey is all about the curious mindset is how do you make an impact. So I thrive from that impact first, and sort of that forces me to sort of think about solutioning, even from an enterprise perspective, or from a community or neighborhoods, etc. So I think there were a couple of things that took place. Fortunately and unfortunately, it's like I did get to work on some of the largest incidents that really, really impacted, and I can maybe reflect on one of them early in my career. One of the largest tech companies, kind of Fortune 100 back in the days, and they had a massive incident, which I was running the war room investigations, forensics, the breach response, kind of the whole 9 yards, and then we helped company recover, build and rebuild. I think going through that journey where all of us as team members were having sleepless nights. We had 3 shifts, bean bags, toothbrush, toothpaste, food outside the war room, and all-nighters, etc. So that was kind of seeing hundreds of millions of people, what they went through in terms of their sort of financial impact to them as well. And of course, the company went through massive brand impact, regulatory consequences, etc. Was definitely a realization at that enterprise level, like how deep it was, and what can I do at a personal level, and more even local level. So of course, I work with my kids, kind of their school or some of the neighborhood and communities. Even giving a first mobile phone to my teenager kid was like, okay, what am I going to do to educate them about safety and security, how to use the apps and the core security settings, and making them vigilant. So I think that sort of drove sort of my inner passion, looking at from enterprises, also being involved in some large nation state attacks that have happened to some of the clientele we've had. And so that's also sort of observing the massive impact this could have to the society at large, to the country at large. Sort of made a massive sort of my personal mission. What can I do on a day-to-day basis if I can, through my clients, through the communities, through sort of the neighborhoods, etc., wherever I am, to sort of pass on that message, or with the tools and methods to make them more secure. At a very personal level, yes, my father had a fish. My father got fished, and early on, and I realized like how some of the campaigns and the quote unquote the criminals work, targeting senior citizens, and so that was also another sort of the personal incident that made it very, very kind of close to home, if I may. And even though he's quite, I would say, from a senior citizen perspective, very tech savvy.
Yeah.
But he fell into that trap, and so I felt it was even more like, how do I pass on some of the training sessions or education sessions even to that demographic, who are a target for the criminal folks.
Yeah, I'm sure that incidents for sure biggest drivers, unfortunately, when it comes to remediation and actually taking security even more seriously, just because, that's unfortunate nature that organizations start to react once the incident already happened, and then that's when you become more vigilant. But I really aspire to that vision, to bring it up to different organizations before actually something happens. And I'm sure you've been in this space for over 20 years. How have you seen the attack surface change for large organizations you were working with, like the ones that you advise?
Yeah, I think definitely great question, and it has changed significantly, right? And when you think about, in the late 90s and even early 2000s, think about, we had a perimeter or a network based kind of security, because it was very much, data center in your own environment, and that was the thing about secure the perimeter. And then sort of there is no perimeter after that, right? So then we are in cloud, and serverless architecture. We were very much about, desktops and laptops, personal PCs, to the explosion of mobile, and now wearables and smart devices, IoT, OT. So you're seeing that now that attack surface sort of moves from where you had very limited infrastructure. And you think about, from a software engineering perspective, very much a waterfall method to, we are deploying code, seamlessly from a CI/CD pipeline, so that pace has gone massive, right? Similarly, you had very much your enterprise applications to gone into SaaS, right? So you're leveraging somebody else's product roadmap and capabilities, workflows and integrations. Where AI ML was very much to a selected few organizations, to now it's fully democratized at the pace. So all of those sort of the tech change that took place. So I think all the attack surfaces, and not to mention third parties. So while we had very few third parties in the ecosystem that we were working with, now we work for all the global organizations in an interconnected world. So you've got a massive ecosystem of third parties, who are also another sort of the attack, surface. You got to make sure you protect your third parties, or have the right level of visibility in their mechanism. So I think with the change in the business models, change in the tech landscape, access to information, access to talent, like now globally, that has led to, of course, more data, more compute, more devices, has led to many more sort of attack surfaces getting much bigger and wider for sort of the bad guys to exploit. So I think our job as a security professionals or business professionals has become harder in terms of to look at the entire ecosystem, because how sort of widespread interconnected it has become.
And if I could just, pick on a few of those that you just mentioned, whether it's SaaS platforms, cloud-based applications, or just the use of different AI tools, all of them are accessed via the browser. And I'm just curious, as this becomes one of the bigger attack surfaces, has this shift really affected security priorities for the organizations that you work with?
Yeah, absolutely. It has. And I would think about, browser as it's a user interface, right? That's the interface that we all predominantly use, right? So it's a access a SaaS application, your emails, collaboration tools, etc. Right? So browser kind of became sort of this ubiquitous, tool for the user interface. So hence, we continue to see sort of the evolution. Of course, folks trying to, from session hijacking to, of course, from your cross-site scripting, etc., that you see on the websites and web portals, exploits that takes in place. We've seen sort of the efficacy or the controls being put into some of those tech stack now. For example, we are seeing like DLP controls put in in browser, right? Not allowing copy paste to happen, session monitoring, or even some of the phishing plugins are available in the browser to make sure impersonated domains to be filtered out. And I think browsers have also become key component of your kind of zero trust strategy to have some of the secure access gateway. They're looking for continuous authentication or adaptive access control for a zero trust environment. So it's all happening through a browser session. So I think organizations are probably not calling out a browser security as a separate landscape or a particular from an investment strategy, but I think it's baked into so many of the other critical capabilities. So whether it's through your anti-phishing, to your DLP stack, or your zero trust strategy, or your CASB and cloud applications that are also monitoring your browser session, right? So that's happening. So I think it's implicit, and I think that's where you think about from a defense in depth perspective. You want to make sure you're looking at different attack vectors, where your crown jewels are, what are the means that users or your information has been accessed, and looking at the entire kill chain to make sure, do we have the right visibility and right controls to protect that? So I think, browser security is essential and a key component of all of those stack that I was just sharing.
Yeah. And how do you think it's impacted your approach within KPMG?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think I would say, like, even for us from a KPMG standpoint, we like significant hardening of our own sort of end user, sort of the machines. So if you think about, for us as a consulting firm, right, we have a mobile workforce. So that's the hardest part. You think about it, right? Several of our professionals, they are not actually in the office. You're on the road, you're traveling to clients, you're mobile. So it was super critical for us to make sure, like, how we protect sort of our endpoints. Because our professionals are on the road. Maybe you are connecting a different Wi-Fi network, etc. So we have all the way from sort of building some very specific, custom sort of software that we deploy on our machines, and at multiple levels, right? Of course, it starts all the way from sort of educating, training, etc., the do's and don'ts to our people, but then also sort of enabling at multiple layers. We have whitelisted, blacklisted certain domains that you cannot access to. So even from a secure browser being allowed, and approved software being allowed to download. So that otherwise the agent flags that you are trying to download something, you're not allowed. So I think it's really, really hardened our machine from encryption to access, encrypting the entire hard drive, and having physical tagging system on the entire laptop, etc. So we have sort of taken multi-step approach. Of course, to access some of our internal networks, you to have multi-factor authentication, and we follow kind of zero trust principles, etc. ourselves. So you got layers and multiple levels. But we have started from BYOD at some point in time. There was a set of flexibility for some of the different unique users, and we have really, really sort of narrowed it down to kind of the custom image that the firm offers, and even while providing secure virtual images where certain professionals need a different set of tools, which are not normal to majority of the professional based upon your persona. So I think the key being like, how can we offer the right environment for our people, but bake security from the get-go with the right level of monitoring, telemetry, blacklisting, whitelisting, some of the tools, kind of pretty much kind of harden our environment, our machines, so that we don't get into an environment given our mobile workforce and bringing something from outside to inside. So that was like our biggest challenge, given our mobile workforce, that we had to make sure sort of really, really build kind of harden endpoints. And that's worked really well.
Yeah, it sounds like you really had to tailor your approach when it comes to working within the company, right? Because there are so many variations. I'm sure it's quite challenging having to adapt for, with such a mobile workforce out there. And then when you even work with, let's say, larger enterprises, what do you think some of the vulnerabilities that many of them overlook that they shouldn't be missing out on?
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, great question. From a large organization, right, having worked for like Fortune 10 to like Fortune 50 organizations, I would say it was less about sort of overload, but I think it was more about kind of prioritization, or the landscape is so big, and so you want to make sure that you have the right coverage. Maybe if I start with the three things that I see like the bad guys exploit, or the weaknesses they exploit the most till today. And then I'll answer the question. So one is, we see still unpatched, insecure systems, internet facing. So they're literally exploiting the walls of these bigger corporations. The second being inconsistent coverage. And what I mean by that is, maybe a company acquired another organizations, or you have another entity in LATAM or APAC, but the US environment application more secure. So you don't have a consistent coverage across your ecosystem, or your third parties are not fully covered, as an example. And the third weakness that the bad guys exploit are they're stealing credentials. So, through phishing, through social engineering, and we oftentimes see, corporate emails and corporate credentials being used for personal use, and then you're part of some sort of a breach, and then corporate credentials become the part of, abuse. I think for organizations, they've not sort of overlooked, but I think it's the consistent application or mitigating these weaknesses, and there are many more. And we all know the bad guys are well funded in some of the very, very organized crime or criminal group and state. InfoSec is still, now it is, I would say, fairly well recognized discipline. Board recognition, C-suite understand the risk profile, etc. Talent, leadership, funding. But if you rewind, maybe 15 years ago or even 10 years ago, and you would see quite a different sort of variation in enterprises in terms of either the appreciation of the risk or the quantification of the risk, and making sure do you have the right coverage, the right team, and deploying of the roadmap and mitigating those risks. So you would find some inconsistencies So I think it's making sure sort of ruthless prioritization, like understanding your environment, understanding your risk, your visibility into those risks. Hence, you're able to sort of really go laser focus in executing and having great partners in the business. The business is running like 200 miles an hour, and the infosec is always trying to catch up. And I think that's the other gap that exists, that you're living in the future, but you're using tools of the past. So you got to make sure you bridge that gap.
Yeah. It seems like prioritization is really a big topic, whether it's at your job, prioritizing different tasks, different priorities, or whether you're security leader that has to. And I think a lot of times CISOs get quite bombarded with different tech, and then the new flashy words come out, and then of course they attract your attention. But at the end of the day, it's focusing on what is the priority. And I just want to shift gears to more of your leadership advice part. I know that you're part of the Purple Book community, which our previous guest is also part of. How did this whole initiative start, and what's the gap that you were looking to fill in cybersecurity community?
Yeah, no, this has been definitely quite a journey. I think it's like 5 years now. In some respects, I want to thank COVID for this. Everybody was sort of paranoid, or given what was happening in 2020. I think few of us came together, some of the co-authors, and it was just the initial group with the thought like, hey, we recognize in the security profession how software is a core component. Every single sort of the application, software-defined neighbor networks, etc. We want to make sure, how do we capture all the learnings and experiences and give it back to the community. So maybe we should write something. And because COVID, we were all at home, and I guess we had more time. Nobody was traveling, so we were willing to give or take our mind off from the pandemic. It was a great excuse in that sense. So it's a lot of nights and weekends. Few of us came together with a single mission to give it back to the community. We give the learnings, and I think in that giving back, you're learning yourself. So it wasn't about that, hey, we have figured out every single answer, but bringing different sort of skill sets and mindsets together. That was the intent, and that sort of became turned into multiple chapters as we started to storyboard or the table of contents. And we suddenly sort of started getting interest from several other professionals in the industry. It's like, hey, this is a great initiative. I would love to join as well. And slowly, like it just grew organically. And we had an amazing learning experience, kind of bonding experience, sharing kind of the personal stories. And from there, it has now become a community. So it started with a book. Never expected it to become a community. And now with the community, sort of, 400 plus community members, multiple events, very topical based upon what's happening. And the intent was, how do you sort of drive less kind of learning amongst the community and bring the relevant leaders based upon the relevant topics, and just kind of sharing the knowledge and thrive that. So it's very community driven. So yeah, it's been an amazing journey and a learning experience, and I've met so many professionals through that process. It's been an amazing experience personally.
Yeah, I personally very grateful that the whole cybersecurity community is becoming more open, where people are more open to sharing what is happening with their peers and what are sort of threats that you need to be more aware of, and what are the best remediation strategies. Because I think back in the days, cybersecurity was a bit of a taboo topic to talk to outsiders. So I'm very grateful to see this change. And I'm curious, what chapter of the book did you contribute to? if someone was to open it.
Yeah, I think my role, multiple chapters with multiple team members. I think the way I work with several of the co-authors that I knew them personally as well, and some I met for the first time during this journey of kind of the book and building the community, was kind of just bring several different client experiences and real life stories. To, that's the advantage of being in consulting, that you see so many different environments, so many different probably even battle scars and wounds that I've gotten, and the learning experiences. So my goal was to kind of really help authors, from the tech chapter, the GRC chapter, to even the AI chapter, kind of sharing different client experiences and case studies, and even how do we think about framing this? What are the different sort of the table of contents, and how should we think about telling the story? Pretty much kind of from the get-go. So I would say I was privileged to kind of keep bringing different experiences, different client stories, so we can make it very real and very tangible for all the authors. And they are amazing. They come from their respective disciplines, and they're sort of masters in their own craft, and just kind of bringing additional stories for them to sort of tell the stories.
That's amazing. That's amazing to be part of such a community. And I'm curious, what's the best advice that you received in your career that you find yourself passing on to others?
Yeah, I think great question. My father has been a huge sort of he's been my kind of mentor, my sort of the idol. He's been a role model for me. Having seen him kind of lead massive kind of the corporate kind of the leadership that he has exuded. There are many things that I learned from him, but I think maybe like 3 things that I can share here, which is always as part of my DNA. He had one philosophy that I always use myself, is a mark of a leader is how many more leaders he or she makes. So that was his sort of kind of the guiding principle. And so it's not about yourself, like, you got to look yourself every single day. And it's less about title. So like, did you help an intern become a consultant, or a consultant become a better senior consultant? But I don't want to mean that in a promotion or a hierarchical manner. But the point being, like, how did you help that individual, gain new skills, make more learning, so they kind of grow in their career. That's what it means, as opposed to titles. Second, that he was always about, true leadership lies in humility. That was kind of his philosophy always. How do you, have a selfless act and be humble about the opportunity you have, and how do you give. And the third thing, he told me there were times when, of course, and I was mentioning that, consulting was hard for me, and we've all seen multiple sort of economic cycles or 2008 crisis, financial crisis that took place. And then we saw the dot-com burst in 2000. Of course, I'm aging myself, so like a lot of people won't remember or recognize that.
Yeah.
He had another principle about, one would sort of get overwhelmed with all these forces of nature happening that you don't control. His philosophy was, good work finds good people. So it was never about, you don't want to compromise your principles, you don't want to compromise your integrity or take shortcuts, etc. His philosophy was like, just do the good work. If you are doing good work, that means you are good people. The work will come to you. And I've seen that. I've personally experienced in those situations how maybe it's the divine forces of nature that kind of comes to you and say, hey, we'll come find you because you're trying to do just the right thing. So I would say kind of those three things. There are lots of other learning experience for several leaders and mentors that I've had the privilege of working with, and then always try and kind of pick one or two things from amazing leaders and mentors I've had the privilege to collaborate with.
Yeah, and I think across all of these three advice, the main thing that keeps on coming back is humility. And as they say, it takes years to build reputation and one day to destroy it. So yeah, very great advice from your dad. And we have this little tradition, Vijay, where our previous guest would ask a question for our next guest. So our previous guest asked you, what is the hardest lesson you had to learn in your life? It can be related to cybersecurity. It can be personal. You can interpret the way you want it to interpret.
I think I would say probably this is maybe most the hardest, or even the simplest realization. And the realization is, especially myself being in tech and surrounded by the innovators, entrepreneurs, disruptors, being in Silicon Valley for so many years, the realization is it all boils down to people. While we are building the next best widget, the next best tech, and fortunately, I realized kind of early in my career, and with amazing leaders around me, was for you to be successful, it is super important to have that level of sort of the leadership, the talent, the team around you. It wasn't about the idea. It wasn't about the tech. And yes, it took me some time to sort of comprehend that, thinking like, oh, I have the best widget, so I'm the best organization or the person. But it wasn't super relevant if you didn't know or didn't have the right team, or you don't have the right consensus with the client or the multi-stakeholders within the client. Your tech didn't really matter. So we have many experiences like that where the realization happened that I thought it was so obvious, but it wasn't obvious because you didn't really work with the right set of stakeholders. So I think what I would sort of leave with the sort of going forward, like we are in this kind of AI war and a race that's happening. And for younger professionals or even the leaders or practitioners and operators, to think about the ecosystem and the relationships that you form with your teams is super critical to sort of drive an outcome, to deliver a value, and not just think about just the tech itself.
That's a great lesson for everyone to learn. And I was talking to one of the founders, and then he was saying that he practically runs a recruitment business where it's all about hiring the right people and being surrounded with the right people. And what kind of question would you like to ask to our next guest?
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I haven't sort of prepared for a difficult question, or not maybe a difficult question, or the right question, I should say, for the next guest. Maybe a two-part question. If somebody who's kind of working in a large organization, and it's a multi-stakeholder sort of environment, I'm always curious to hear how folks have a different approach in building consensus and using sort of the art of storytelling to sort of deliver that message while you are trying to build a consensus. So I would love to hear some examples of sort of the art of storytelling, and maybe it's a couple of different variations, whether it's building consensus or delivering a message within enterprise. And maybe a second part, if your next guest is or the next guest happens to be an entrepreneur or a founder, a disruptor, and definitely, what should this next generation, especially let's say folks who are graduating this year or the next, 3 to 4 years, the massive amount of change that is happening, how can they be sort of attuned to sort of make some social impact, like the skills that they should learn, they should adapt. They've got massive access to information, massive access to tech. How they can use to think about making a social impact, not just a financial or a monetary impact for themselves. So that's something I would love to hear for some folks and ideas, how to use this tech to drive a much bigger social impact in the community, in the society, rather than just for themselves.
I feel a bit bad for our next guest. That's very it's a great question to ask, and really inspires some forward thinking. Well, thank you so much, Vijay, for being part of our Be Fearless podcast. It was a great pleasure having you here. So many ideas discussed, whether it was the Purple Book community, your experience at KPMG, and whether you should be a consultant in cyberspace and what it takes to be a consultant in cyberspace. I think it's super valuable lessons for whoever is thinking to enter the industry or switching into consulting realm. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Sasha. It was a pleasure, and again, and absolutely, thrilled to be here. And thank you for having me. Really appreciate that.